Someone in the last comment is the first time anyone has said anything about making a donation, and I I'm going to look into YouTube about how to make a like some form of, I think different YouTubers have different ways that they can obtain support, and like they call that when you do something of value like art or ideas or work, that's all called remuneration, and it's good to remunerate artists and authors. I had a vast personal library. I had a stability in my life for about 5 to 6 years. This was prior to and right up. This was prior to the pandemic, and then up until the end of the pandemic phase. And actually, I'm from the Twin Cities, Minnesota. I grew up in the exact neighborhood where the George Floyd incident occurred, but I lived more of my life in St. Paul and closer to the location where Philando Castile was slain famously, but lesser, not as it's not as famous as George Floyd, but many people who are African American or familiar with the African American plight and struggle in America would be familiar with the Philando Castile slaying. That was a famous slaying that took place on a road, a unique road in St. Paul. That's it's in the middle of the city. It's in the middle of the metro area of the Twin Cities, but within St. Paul. But that road, Larpenteur, it sits very close to it's actually, it skirts and it lines the St. Paul version and campus of the University of Minnesota, the state school of the University of Minnesota, one of the largest state schools and a big engine of research and professionals and learned people and skilled people. I think the University of Minnesota, it typically has at least like 50,000 students a year, undergraduate or more. So it's like a city within the town, like a lot of campuses are. And I grew up there on what's called like the West Bank. That's how I got onto being who I am from that calculus and trajectory. And but that on the St. Paul side, that road, that Larpenteur, it sits on the farmland, so it's a little bit rural, and it's not rural, but it's kind of it can feel rural and it can tempt people to speed. And then there's about 4 or 5 police jurisdictions that overlap their city municipality lines that near about overlap there as far as patrolling would go and like quotas for taking up speed tickets. So you have like St. Paul, the city of St. Paul, the city of Roseville, the city of Falcon Heights, the city of New Brighton, North Minneapolis, so at least like 4 or 5 precincts. I had it explained to me by an actual a famous DJ. I was friends with a DJ coming out of high school, DJ Expect of the famous KMOJ in Minneapolis, and he was a brilliant man. He's from Kenya, and so he really knew how to party because they have a different, Africa in general and especially Kenya, they have a different culture around partying, and they really know how to have a good time without messing up for themselves and other people. So a lot of good times were there. All kinds of people were there, but it was always there was actually very little, if any, bullshit there that at least I was aware of. But so that happened about 4 years prior to the pandemic. And then so I think that actually that was a famous thing that drew a lot of flack for the police department across the country. That was one that upped the ante and the tick of the pushback and blowback of police brutality. So all those police in the Twin Cities, they would have been getting repercussions from that heinous slaying of Philando Castile. It's actually incredible. He was pulled over. I used to work on my first driving job was at Jimmy John's. That sits right there, less than a city block away from when he was assassinated, I think. And he was actually assassinated with his girlfriend and with his daughter, a small child in the vehicle, small enough that she was a precious baby, but cognizant enough that she understand what is happening and what happened. And his girlfriend recorded the thing on phone. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been it wouldn't have got the attention and traction that it amounted to, and that it was worthy of it. But it was an example of how bad that can be. And I was actually I was thinking of taking that road that night. I was actually in that area that night, and I was thinking of taking that very path that night. I had come from a bookstore. Somebody insulted me in a bookstore, and I was in a vehicle, and I was just thinking of driving down that road that night. Because at that time in my life, I had prior to that, I used to read a lot, and like I'm gonna do now, this is a Bible study video I'm gonna launch into. But I would always read the footnotes. But at that time, I was a pizza driver, and I had damaged my glasses, so I put tape on the glass right there. And this clerk where I used to always fill up before my shifts next to the pizza shop on the east side in St. Paul, he's like, man, that's not good for your eyes what you're doing right there. But back then I was just a jackass. I would work dangerous shit. I do dumb things, so I kept rocking like that, but reading the footnotes, and it did a lot of damage to my eyes for like 3 or 4 years. I couldn't read books, and I couldn't drive cars at night because I would just get this stinging, this sticking, pinging feeling in my eye. So at that time, when Philando Castile was slain, I was thinking about and being recruited to being a CDL, which I later would be. But I would take these excursions around the Twin Cities at that time. Like the Twin Cities has like the 94 was gentrified Rondo neighborhood and goes through St. Paul. And then you have 35 that goes north and south, 94 goes east and west. But 694 and 494 and 394 make a circle around the city so that you don't have to go through, you can bypass the city if you don't want to go through the urban area or the developed area if you're driving like interstate. So I would go, at that time, I would go in circles around the Twin Cities like a jackass because I like driving, but also because I was testing my eyes to see like if I could really handle. I wasn't sure if I wanted to take up being a CDL because I didn't know if my eyes could really handle it. So I would just kind of drive to release stress. I kind of like Will Smith, like just cruising, where baby I don't care. Like I used to rock that song, and some of those songs kind of program you. But that very night I was doing dumb things like that, very dumb things to be driving uselessly like that, and I was thinking of taking that path. So when he got slain like that, it hit home. But all I'm saying is that that's the same city 4 years later where Philando Castile was slain, and then then George Floyd was slain, and that impacted the whole world with the how that affected the lockdowns and then the mobilizing of people to stand up to the system, but also lockdowns. And you could say maybe where we're at as a society now, having come through the pandemic, would be different, save for the actual the world was stifled. When things are stagnant, you need things to get things back to normal. But you still had injustice going on even while things were static. So that actually injustice it was a tragedy, and yet it was still impactful because it shed light when everybody was at home and had nothing else to do but consume media. It shed light on what was still going on even in the pandemic. But at that time, the reason I mentioned that is because at that time I worked from about 2016 until about the time of 21. When at that time, at the end of the pandemics in 21, Philando Castile was slain in 2020 in the spring and early summer, and I had to commute to my family was like, man, something just happened in Minneapolis, man. There's protesting and rioting. I didn't understand how pivotal it was when it happened, but it was different because I grew up in that city. A lot of wicked, horrible shit happened to me, but I never saw just wicked shit happening. And then all of a sudden they're like crazy, like just crazy activity, people like rioting, but also cars driving through the neighborhood, lockdowns, curfew, things I would have never expected. But also I was a frontline worker because I was taking care of elderly people in their homes. I was taking care of a older gentleman from the South at that time and picking up after him and his grandchildren that would tear his apartment up daily. But I had to get to him through that stuff. But all the way from 2016 until that point, and the next year, the end of 21, I was stable, and I amassed a personal library, and then at the end of that point in 21, my mother was diagnosed with a terminal illness that shook up our family, and I realized that my job as a PCA, it was flexible and it allowed me to study and pursue music and things like that. But I realized it wouldn't be viable to support myself, and I didn't know what it took to support yourself, so I thought I had to do better. So that's when I transitioned to being a CDL. I was intending to be an over-the-road truck driver, but in doing so, I was recruited to become an over-the-road bus driver because they have a little bit better of amenities sometimes and benefits and and contracts and protection. But to do that, you have to begin as a school bus driver to get the actual 2 years of experience you need with a big vehicle under your belt before they have you doing interstate driving like that. And then so I began in a non-CDL vehicle the first year, and I got on a CDL and on like that. But the only reason I say that is because I mastered a personal library, a vast personal library of nonfiction, spiritual, and music books. But recently, I actually lost that entire library. I still have a record of most of those books on Amazon. But the thing I'm proud about in that is that the entire library that I amassed, I didn't have time to read all of it. Not because if you had a personal library, say like a lot of music books and stuff like that, there'd have to be a way you'd approach that, because you have to approach things with a strategy. So I would have had to approach those music books with strategy to compare them, contrast them, and get the best out of them, but not necessarily practice every lesson of every book to get through them. But all I meant to say is that I'm proud that I actually compensated those authors, whether or not I got to read their material. Some authors, famous authors, like I had the entire collection of Robert Greene, like the 48 Laws of Power. I had the entire collection of Rollo Tomasi that deals a lot with interpersonal and intergender dynamics for adults in things like dating and courting and family creation, and also like living strong as a male. He's actually somewhat of a male advocate, and he's actually one person, a rare person, that speaks to some of the deprivation and injustice that males suffer by and large in this country, in this iteration society, and in many societies. And I want to talk about that a little bit, as it has to do with the Bible and some of the recent experiences I've had. And then I had like the entire collection of Nassim Nicholas Taleb, who had the book Skin in the Game, Outlier, Anti-Fragile, some very brilliant books. But I read a lot of them, but at least I remunerate. The word for that, when you're compensating authors for what you're about to read or intending to read, is called remunerating them. So if you go to a library, ostensibly they've already been compensated because the library had to purchase that book, but they're not entirely, to my taste, maybe equitably being compensated, that is remunerated. So I just wanted to show what that word remunerate means. But in this series, I've been doing this channel this long. I'm now at 1,000, nearly just coming up on 1,000 videos, but I haven't been remunerated or asked to be remunerated. But someone on here mentioned that something about a donation yesterday. So I'm just saying that I'm gonna access the app. But right now I'm going through hard times, so I don't have a bank account, and I don't know if these apps need to be tied to a bank account to be viable for that. But nobody watching this owes me anything. But if you wanted to remunerate me anything truly, is just be honest to yourself in all things. The way you could pay me back is to pay it forward, which is nothing more than be honest. Because the more you're honest, the sooner you're gonna get towards your true vocation and voice in this life, whether that has anything to do with speaking or not. And we all stand to gain when you reach your vocation. So this channel it's actually a vocation channel, even though I'm intending it as a songwriter and becoming a songwriter while I'm doing this. So I just want to start with that. But now I'm going to get back to the purpose of this video, which is a Bible study. So this is my leather-bound, recently gifted a week ago today. I received this leather-bound Holy Bible. I'm going to begin each time with a benediction at the front that appears in it. This Bible is presented to Wise Chris by Blessed Maria on this day, March 21st of the year 2026 of our Lord. Thank you. Your word is a lamp for my feet, a light on my path. Psalm 119 and 105. So yesterday I began by discussing the stipulations in the publication notes at the beginning of the book, which are salient for my purposes and anyone viewing the Bible, but also to show you that there's value. Anybody who's sincerely interested in the value and also doing study of it, but also maybe making something of value, whether that be content online like this. My first time that somebody mentioned something about a donation on this channel was the very video that I'm doing a Bible study. So that shows you that the Bible is valuable. But this book is not saying that that's wrong. This book here, I'll just briefly go over one stipulation of the publication. I went over it thoroughly in the prior video, and I intend this Bible study series as one collection and iteration and body of volume of work within the channel unto itself. And so I went to painstaking details yesterday on the publication notes, but I'll just go to one stipulation here within them that says, and repeat, the capital N, capital I, capital V, registered trademark symbol text may be quoted in any form, parentheses, written, visual, electronic, or audio, end parentheses, up to and inclusive of 500, parentheses, 500, end parentheses, verses without the express written permission of the publisher, providing the verses quoted do not amount to a complete book of the Bible, nor do the verses quoted account for 25%, parentheses, 25% sign, end parentheses, or more of the total text of the work in which they are quoted. With that, I'm going to be doing a Bible study here, and I'm going to point out as many salient scriptures as I can in the Bible. What I've realized is that a good way to read the Bible and any book, see, sometimes you may have seen people working out, and while they're working out, they're having somebody punch them, like while they're working out like that. That's good for your body, that actual resistance like that. But also you can do that in other things. Like, for example, if you had an interest in being a performer, right, in being a musical performer, which is part of this channel, songwriting, being a performer is different than it can be similar to and synonymous with and overlap with, but not by default the same as having skill and or talent in music and or having relationship and experience with an instrument is not the same thing as performing, and that too vocally. Because when you perform alone, like they call that woodshedding, like you perform in your apartment in a quiet room, that's a beautiful aesthetic. That's very romantic. That's awesome. That's excellent. But that's not the same thing as performing broadly, publicly, and being accountable to any reaction you can get, up to and including friction with local enforcement, local business owners. You could potentially actually get, if you want to be good at something, you have to practice it constantly. I don't think many people would. I'm not saying creativity and talent and inspiration are dependent on practicing, but I figure most people in the country over in modern Western terms would agree with the concept of 10,000 hours to be well at something. But you would think that, man, how am I going to get 10,000 hours at something? I'm going to have to get a really good job that allows me 3 hours a day to myself, and then I'm going to practice for 3 hours a day, and then in 10 years I'll get 10,000 hours. Not necessarily so if you are sincere. If you, like I'm akin to, and I've been doing for the last 2 year and coming up on 2 years, more so a year and over a year and a half, is I take a instrument with me everywhere and I go in life. Whether I had to defend myself with it, whether I had to run for my life with it, whether I had to wait in line somewhere, even if I'm waiting in line at a bank or somewhere where it would be offensive to make noise, I can still fret it like that. And that's one of the best ways to get better at the instrument, is the famous claw exercise, is where you make your finger like a flute and you go over the same string like this, but then you practice independence and you can improvise that in any way, but then you can also do bar chords like that. And you can go up and down the scale, and you can bring your thumb in, and there's no end to how much you can practice and become familiar with fretting the instrument like that. That's a lot of playing the guitar. On top of that is to use your ear. There's a few techniques that do help you at guitar, which is that you would want to keep your finger low over the string. And the basic rule of thumb for guitar, if there was any rule, is comfort and efficiency. The more comfortable you feel as you shift your body in the guitar, the longer you can play, the better you can play, the more technical you can play. But also, the more you would be efficient and not wasting motions. Like, you wouldn't want your fingers up here. You wouldn't want to be doing like eccentric, idiosyncratic things as they become aware to you. All of us have idiosyncrasies. Our personality itself, maybe our consciousness itself, is an idiosyncrasy and a outlier and an aberrant to the normal, which is why we're personally unique and viable. Because nothing is viable without a niche and a lane and a strong suit, and that's a lot of who we are, is that we're aberrant by nature, I think. We are constituted as idiosyncratic, and any person that pick up any instrument or even enunciate their own voice, you have idiosyncrasies in there, which in a technical way, in a quote unquote proper way, in a traditional way, that could be looked down upon. But in a true way, in a musical way, in an artistic way, that's the realest, coolest shit, and that's viable as anything that's technical. And you could manage that as well and better as anything that's technical if you would trust yourself and believe in yourself. As the great Victor Wooten has a book about that. He's a Grammy-winning bassist, and he has a book telling some of his insight about what it means to be a musician, and that there is no wrong note, because any note can be played off and played up to be cool if you would run with it. But an audience can tell the difference between what you intend, or that is what you're feeling, and what you're not feeling. So if you're feeling in a mode and then you play something wrong, and then you feel bad about that, now you sound whack. If you're playing in a mode and you play something wrong, but you're still feeling good about it, and then you riff on that, and you're familiar with the instrument, and you're having enough of a daily practice that you can expand upon that, now that's the rock and roll shit, and there's no end to that, what's possible with that in terms of harmony. However sophisticated, however mathematical, that shit works for me. If that shit works for you, is what an audience says, if you're really about that. But so too, when you practice an instrument, you could potentially get bounced from a premises. If you said the wrong word, or even were misconstrued the wrong way, you could actually end up in handcuffs. So practicing the chops for music is not no pushover shit. But that too, if you wanted to be an artist and you had to take all the life steps and risks that it mean to have the space and the viability to be an artist, that's risky. What all that actually is the quest of knowledge. So yoga, according to Arthur Avalon and Swami Vivekananda. Swami Vivekananda is an actual Indian inheritor of yoga, and Arthur Avalon was grafted into and taught himself in actual Indian. But you have Hatha yoga, which is like the postures people would know about. You have Kriya yoga, which is like, I think that's like the actions of your life, your deeds and things like that. You have Bhakti yoga, which is like enjoyment and doing yoga through enjoyment. Then you have Raja yoga. I think that's the most difficult form of yoga. I can't enunciate what Raja is clearly. That's not been written about a lot. But I think there's the different forms of yoga are explained by what they occur in the works of Arthur Avalon, the Serpent Power, which refers to Kundalini energy, Principles of the Tantra 1 and 2, and a couple other works he had, including Hymns to Kali, and also Maha Nirvana, the Great Liberation. Arthur Avalon has those books, and if you read the footnotes, there's as much about India and India culture as the text itself. An example is, it occurs in some of the footnotes of Arthur Avalon. India, they appreciate that this earth has 6 seasons, not 4. So January and February is the true cold dead of winter. July and August is the true summer, hot summer. September and October is the true fall. November and December is the beginning light winter. March, April is the beginning of spring, and May, June is the end of spring, beginning of summer. Those are 6 distinct seasons that's appreciated in India, according to Arthur Avalon, and that occurs in his footnotes. But then Swami Vivekananda, and then Arthur Avalon also delineates and discusses that there are different forms of yoga, including jnana yoga, which is that of knowledge. And according to Arthur Avalon, that's the most risky and arduous form of yoga, and that's the most difficult and arduous undertaking for a human being possible, is knowledge. An example is, a lot of times, say it's very scary when you're getting to the end of high school, right? Nowadays, the value and meaning of education and reality of it changes. In the old days, there were different limitations to how we could access knowledge, and there are different forms of gatekeeping and financial hurdles to learning things. That would constitute the value of what it means to be educated, but also the deprivation of what it means to be not educated, like in terms of a loser. Then that was co-opted, corrupted, monopolized, commercialized by higher ed, actually, and big government, and big banks. That it became just complete utter racket education. I don't think many people would argue me on that. Any level of education is absurdly out of price, and an injustice, disservice to the coming generations that need the training to get on, to access their talent and be viable in this society, which is heavily litigated, and it's mandated to be vetted and go through different kinds of training to enjoy one's vocation in this life, such as the necessity for higher education, even present, but also is the trap of it and the racket of it. But then after the 2000s, and especially with the proliferation of online activity, access to resources for learning, but also access to different venues to educate yourself, and also upload content, which is also part of educating yourself, has changed. But you can still appreciate, as a young person, when you get to the end of high school, that's scary, because like, hey man, you're gonna be 18, man. What are you gonna do with your life, man? Your friends are going over here, they got their shit figured out. They're gonna go over here and they're gonna frolic and they're gonna parlay all day, and then they're gonna be the greatest shit ever when they barely get by with those season shit. And then this guy over here is going off to join the military. He's never set foot in the military, so there's no way under heaven that he could know what he's signing up for. But he's gonna do that, and he's a great guy. What are you gonna do, buddy? So you know that you have obligation, at least you think, to participate in this society, which actually is corrupt and unjust. But you still want to enjoy different things, so you're enticed to participate in the society that is rat race. But you want to go to school for something, or you want to develop yourself at something. Where are you going to go to school? What if you fail? How much money is it going to cost? How much is the money going to cost if you fail? But also, how much time is it going to take you? How much stress is it going to take you? And what are you being deprived of learning and or doing in terms of skill or livelihood over here that you're casting off, or you're neglecting by doing this education thing over here? Whether it inspires you or not, whether it's righteous or not, whether it's creative or not, whether it's artistic or not, when you put your attention over here, you take it away from over there. But that thing over there could also save your life, or you could enjoy that, or you could have a different future, and you don't know that when you're beginning. So thereby, the quest of knowledge, the yoga of knowledge, is the most formidable, daunting, dangerous thing that a human being can go through on this earth. And that's part of what it is to be scared about life when you're growing up, is that you're actually getting into the realest thing possible. But a more clear delineation and explanation of the different forms of yoga occurred by Swami Vivekananda, a freedom fighter of India, who National Youth Day is recognized actor in India, and he was a proponent of and made some of the inroads that actually made Hinduism respected as a world religion. He's responsible for Hinduism be respected on the world stage, according to the biography in the beginning of that book. And then he's an honored man, and I think I extrapolate that some of our tolerance currently in the West that amounted to also men such as Martin Luther King, though as enlightening as Martin Luther King was, as humane as he was also markedly, that means significantly and outstandingly and blatantly eclectic. That means borrowing from different traditions, and Catholic in the sense of being able to borrow and reference. I'm referring to Mahatma Gandhi, a man from India. I think that Mahatma Gandhi got some of his principles of nonviolence that Martin Luther King leveraged to our current state of freedom in the United States through the Jaina people of India, who occur in the works of Arthur Avalon, and also the great orator Osho, who Osho was more of an iconoclast. He was a scholar in his own right, but he was an anti-scholar while being a scholar, Osho. But they both speak of the Jaina people. But the Jaina people have a word that's called ahimsa. Himsa means harm. Ahimsa means non-injury to any being. If you take anything to the true extent, whether you're a practicing Jewish person, whether you are a Christian, whether you're a nonviolent person, whether you're a violent person, anything you would do sincerely, it's going to get crazy, and it actually gets almost silly how severe it is. So the Jaina people, they would go so far as to not step on grass, or if a bed would be infested with bed bugs. I've been in shelters recently. I haven't suffered from bed bugs, but I've seen people that are itching that whole time. Bed bugs can be horrible. The actual Jaina people would allow bed bugs to feast on their flesh, because they're not going to deprive the bed bug of yet its sustenance, as it's yet a member of this existence. How severe they would take that. But I extrapolate that Mahatma Gandhi borrowed from that, but the actual climate and culture in America by the time of the Civil Rights Movement and up to that, for Martin Luther King to be as Catholic and enlightened, and the actual temperature and climate, for him to be open-minded, but also for him to be viable for learning about another faith walk all the way from India, with as actually some people that are young, or maybe even people that are not young may tend to forget that even in the beginning of this current 21st century and the latter point of the last century, there was a lot of strict religion. There was actually superstition within religion and religious intolerance that would make people afraid to or cautioned against picking up any written copy from any other text or line of faith than the Holy Christian Bible itself, and that too paying homage to or appreciating the standpoint in terms of spirituality and approach to life of any other people, not the least of which people from India. So Martin Luther King himself, coming from a outstanding, eminent, but thoroughly Christian background and upbringing within the church himself, a minister within the church himself, for him to be as open-minded, enlightened, and Catholic, to appropriate and but yet appreciate and awesomely utilize the example of Mahatma Gandhi. There was actually a climate in America that made that viable, and there were some inroads that were made in the beginning of the 20th century that I've referenced on this video that I'm aware of, at least, not the least of which Swami Vivekananda, the Theosophist Society of renown, whether or not they were entirely congruent or not, including Daisetsu Suzuki, who was a proponent of Zen Buddhism, and he was an American academic. He migrated to America and became a tenured professor and enjoyed a comfortable tenured position with a loving wife that allowed him to be prolific in writing. And but he actually was a proponent of and detailed a lot of what Zen Buddhism is for American audience, and a lot of the flower generation they appropriated and leaned into and enjoyed and practiced different degrees of Zen Buddhism that had to do with the flower generation, and that was a tenet of, parallel of, and part of also the aesthetic the ambience of some of the drug use in the 60s generation that amounted to enough of leeway and wiggle way for an actual brilliant movement to transpire, because otherwise America had been more rigid, I think, prior to some of these inroads. Then also is Gerald Gardner, I think, who was a proponent of Wicca in at least the time of the 40s. And those people must be appreciated in some of the inroads. And Arthur Avalon also for bringing Tantra and Kundalini yoga to Western audiences. Likely, if anyone's familiar with Kundalini and Tantra, sincerely, they would have been blessed by, or anyone that would have taught them that line of tradition that's a Western speaking teacher and Western reared teacher, they would have come across or been influenced at least by the works of Arthur Avalon. And all those are different inroads. So I'm gonna go back. So the value in scholarship and the Bible is valuable. So what I want to say is that what I'm saying is that for you to become come into your own right as a performer of music, it would avail you to practice as publicly as and spontaneously and as inspiration as often as possible. The more challenge, just like a comedian, if you have a hilarious person and you have a very stifled, for lack of a better word, upright person that's limited in their self-expression, that's an opportunity for a comedian to be more hilarious. That's called a straight man. But what that is that the difficulty of a social environment, the actual formalities of a social environment, the assumptions, the prejudices, the biases, the knee-jerk responses, those are actually the perfect opportunity for humor. But so too, they're actually equally viable for music. So if you're in an environment, any environment you would not be familiar with or comfortable with, but you have at least enough of a leeway to practice music without offending someone to the point of harming them or yourself, that is actually awesome opportunity to practice, and that gives you more chops, because that's actually a different degree of resistance, like lifting weights. So doing things publicly, you learn quicker, but also you become into your own right. And I wanted to say one thing. I wanted to say with that is that on this channel, I've been doing more of vocalizing, like singing and stuff like that, but also I started doing less of recorded music and vocalizing. And I just want to say with that, I won't go down into this very different subject, but performing music to be recorded and performing music spontaneously without any notion of being compensated or being recognized, but yet still being public and sharing music, that's different than recorded music. And what you're able to perform and fathom when not recording is different than what you can do when recording, because you have an actual different intention and thereby you have a different mind. Even if it's fun to record music. However, it's difficult to capture the actual idea. Like I would make a song in a day. I can make a track in a day. Not something that I could publish per se, but something that I'd be proud enough to rock with and upload somewhere. I can do that usually in like a Sunday afternoon. But if you're playing on a keyboard and then you hear something cool, you hearing that, you creating that cool sound is different than the moment that you hit record and try to repeat that, because your mind's different. But also, there's only so much that you can get away with recording. That there's different sounds that will interfere. There's different thoughts that will interfere. There's different ways that a performance cannot be repeated, such that if you were to appreciate like ostensibly the greatest album, there was a man who broke down producing on a video. I can't remember that man's name, but he was explaining that the album Thriller by Michael Jackson, that's largely respected as the greatest published album of all time in terms of production. Now, the greatest record. Now, at that time, they were actually having real records, but some people don't know that any track that's recorded now and then is actually a record. So a record is not a composite of at least 12 tracks, finished tracks. That's not only what a record is. In music business and music talk and music speak, a record is an actual a song, an iteration of a music idea that's published. That's a record. And so some would say that the greatest record of all time, which actually had come out as a record, was the Thriller album. That too, maybe I would estimate any one of those tracks would have to be the greatest record of all time. But I'm gonna come up online and say that I think that I would ask anyone how you rock with this. They say the greatest record, as in like a full album, the greatest album of all time is a Thriller album by Michael Jackson. Maybe the song Thriller could be the greatest record then, because that's arguably the greatest. I'm not gonna say it's the greatest album on Thriller, but damn, I mean, Thriller on the Thriller album is we know what Thriller's about. I don't gotta talk about Thriller, but any of those tracks on the Thriller album are outstanding. However, in terms of production and musicality, I wanna big up the song "Hey Lover" by LL Cool J, which I think that was done on Analog by Rick Rubin. I actually met a real rock and roller where I'm at. He's actually related to some of the people in Parliament Funkadelic, and they were down with George Clinton. And our whole hip hop funk, all of our hip hop has been blessed by George Clinton. And George Clinton had an influence in all of our hip hop, I think, if we're honest. But this man he pointed out to me that Rick Rubin had produced that song "Hey Lover" by LL Cool J, and I would refer anyone to go to the song "Hey Lover" by LL Cool J and see if that's not one of the greatest records, that is tracks produced, how that's produced. You have Boyz II Men on there, LL Cool J and Rick Rubin on the production. I know I'm about to do a Bible a study here, but goddamn, but I just want to say that when you go to record something, it's different than doing something spontaneously, there's something to be said for capturing something, recording, but also there's something that can't be done when you try to do something intentionally rather than perform with spontaneity. So practicing with spontaneity and performing spontaneity is the best way to learn how to perform. And the different challenges in environment and distractions make you more of whatever you're doing. But to that point, the only reason I mentioned that in this Bible video is because the more you perform publicly, the more you can practice and without being interfered with. Then it would be difficult for some people to read a book in public. Like right now, I'm actually I'm not living on the street, but I'm living near the street and I'm on the actual street. But I can read the Bible itself and any book as well on the street or in a train, and better than I could in a room all alone reading to myself silently. How is that? Because when I read the Bible, I read it out loud. It's my voice now. It's even when people are talking this and that, you can still hear your inner voice, and you can still hear your inner voice better when you're speaking than when you're thinking. So the best way to actually keep your concentration on the Bible, whether you're in public or alone, is actually to read it out loud, because you have to be aware of what you're saying. The best way to learn something reading is actually to copy it down. If you have a book and you actually just like some people would see scribes in the old days, and these scribes, they look profound, but all they would do is write down manuscripts before there was printers. Why did they look profound? Because as you write something, you are wherever your eye goes, your existence goes, but so too does your hand and your entire existence, which is also your hand. Your hand goes wherever your eyes go, but also your mind goes where your eyes and your hand goes. So by the time that you write something down, your mind went through that a lot more than actually just cursory, that means superficially, glossing over text. But so I learned this from a Jewish man who is a Christian, is that when you read the Bible or any book, it's better to hold it above your heart, because when you hold it above your heart, you're communicating reverence to what the book is and what it's about, and you're assuming a different posture, a reverent, consecrated posture, by holding it above your heart. And also pain retains. So the little bit of discomfort, it actually makes you stronger, better posture, and it actually fortifies your mind, and you're distracted less and you daydream less while holding it above your heart and saying it out loud. Then if you hold it up, that communicates reverence. If you hold it up like this, that's reverence. If you hold it down like this, that communicates power to yourself first, the universe second, and yourself third, like that. That's an insight from a Jewish man that's part of the Jewish faith. And what I said in this book is that the original books of the Bible are they're Jewish books, because they have to do with Abraham and his descendants, including Judah and the 12 tribes of Judah, which are the Jewish people on earth, so-called, rightfully or not, the so-called Jewish people of the earth are the descendants of Jacob. according to the Holy Bible. So the old books of the Bible are Jewish. But I've said in this channel is that I met a rabbi last summer, and he spent time with me, a lot of time personally, and he brought me on to some. He blessed me with some of his understanding. But what I learned by being with him is that to practice a faith like Judaism publicly, like according to Arthur Avalon, who wrote about Hinduism, some people practicing, I should say, Bharata Dharma, the faith of India, sometimes even back then, people would be afraid to adorn religious garb. They would want to keep their faith to themselves. That's a deeper thing to Arthur Avalon, is that if you're real enough about anything, at one point, you won't be able to hide it. They would say that some people used to practice their secret, but I beg to differ whether it's possible to be about anything and never reveal it. It will come out because the truth comes to the light. So it's actually important, if you're about something, either you're going to conceal it and you're going to be revealed while concealing it, or you sustain the initiative and you reveal it of your own choosing. That's recommended by Arthur Avalon, and that's what it would mean to put like a bindi dot on your forehead, like the women in India do. But then you would have to live up to that, because otherwise there's a lot of grave consequences that can come with reneging. That means like to offer something in a bet and then pull it back without having to forfeit it prematurely. That's not auspicious. That means promising in spiritual terms. A lot of people in different faiths could agree with that. But then also for a Jewish person, the attire, the hair, and the comportment and the lifestyle are such that it is worthy of and attendant of honor. But it also comes with deprivations in that they have to live up to not only the reality of that, but the appearance of that, and they cannot frequent certain venues at certain times of day, up to and including highway, rest area, gas stations, because of some of the things sold there would not be kosher. So that rabbi I was talking to, he was in the process of creating some unique kosher dishes, some things that people like himself can't enjoy, like certain foods. He had his own butchery, and he was in the process of fashioning some original kosher cuisine that would be delicious, like standard all-American food, but it's still kosher. And he was wanting to court me on to make me something of a understudy of his, and help me or have me attend him as he would broker and broach that prospect of an undertaking with some of the salient, prosperous, and renowned and immaculate grocery venues in the Twin Cities that have Jewish clientele and American clientele. But what I meant to say is that there's something to be said for representing what you're about and presenting what you're about that can't be concealed. But some of the actual understandings of the Bible of what it is to be Jewish are they appreciate the Old Testament differently than non-Jewish people, and the words of the actual sayings and the words as they're translated literally into English, they mean different, and they're intended different and understood different to actually people of the Jewish faith than what would be called Gentiles, anything other than Jews. But also the purpose of Jesus Christ himself, the significance of Jesus Christ for earth is not only his sacrifice and mercy, which is profound, but what his sacrifice and mercy does is it extends the heirloom and the blessing and the consecration of God himself, of the Holy Bible, referred to so-called respectfully, to a man named Abraham. Abraham's line, which had been Isaac first, then Jacob and Esau, Jacob being the younger brother, then Jacob and with his mother's coaching swindled his older brother of his blessing and inheritance, which would have been that of the Jewish faith, by means of preparing a bowl of soup, which is reminiscent and to my taste can be an analogy of how we have different things stolen from us in terms of value by being catered to, fed, wined and dined, and serviced by this society in so many ways, including real estate, including mechanics, including education, so many things that are done for us and brought to us that we could otherwise do for ourselves better and or better locally than with the global apparatus. It takes value from us in different ways that it can amount to our own future on this earth and our own potential progeny, similar to Esau, however we'd appreciate that. But then by way of Jacob had been 12 children of his that each were their own family lines and tribes, and one of which with different strengths and propensities, and one of which being that of Judah, which was renowned for and blessed to be a worshiping family. That of worship was where Jesus himself inherited through. And then Jesus brought Jews and Gentiles to the God of the Bible by way of grace as an ambassador, an intercessor, and that extends the blessing, which was the intention of the original promise to God, to Abraham, to the entire earth, including Jews and non-Jews, that is Gentiles, and even creatures upon the earth, based on the justice and equity that's in the actual the consecration of the commandments of God. But the following of the commandments of God of the Old Testament would have been difficult for any person, and they can be a sticking point whether someone lives up to them or not, because their fulfillment can amount to pride and or insurmountable difficulty that requires grace and forgiving, which is that Jesus himself is said to have fulfilled the entire word and is the word, because the word is God and God is the Holy Trinity according to the Holy Bible, New Testament. That is Jesus, the Holy Spirit, the Father, and which is all the word. And the word is the promise between God and Abraham to prosper Abraham and his progeny later by way of his grandson Jacob. But the blessing of that was intended for the entire earth, but was viable for the entire earth, both the old law and the present operation of God, by way of the mercy of having faith in one of the greatest sons. So you could say that of the line of the Jews, you could say of the line of the Jews, including up to and beyond Abraham himself as the father of the Jewish line, Jesus was the greatest man of that line. You could say that if you're a Judeo-Christian person, you could extrapolate that Jesus had been the greatest of the line of Abraham, because he is of the line of Abraham. But the line of Abraham was already a blessing to the line of Abraham, but not also to the entire earth and all the animals and creatures subject to men on the earth, which would be under the umbrella of God's reign. And so of that line, Jesus is the most viable, awesome, and potent one to be of a blessing to both Jewish people and non-Jewish people, and the fulfillment of true love, which is God. But to that extent, I'm going to do this about the Bible, but I will say as my personal rule of thumb and my golden rule of the Bible. So the Bible explains the golden rule. I think that is do unto others as you'd have it do unto yourself. But the way that I understand the golden rule is by way of the scripture. I'm going to go through the whole Bible with the Old Testament, but I'm going to begin my Bible study with the scripture of Mark. I have been through. So what I'm saying with this video is I think the best way to read the Bible is out loud fully. And if you do that, you can sustain your attention better than you would silently, and then to default to daydreaming, and or to be public and be distracted, and or default to daydreaming publicly by speaking out loud to yourself. Even if you're on a train right now, I'm being passed by a trolley. I was on that trolley yesterday. On that trolley, I can still read silently to myself, but still be verbalizing, and it's going to go through my mind differently while verbalizing than it would reading silently, and that's what I recommend. But to each their own, and each their own approach, because different people have different techniques and knacks that work for them, and none is greater or less than another if you enjoy what works for you. Or I should say, as you enjoy what works for you. So I'm going to begin my entire Bible study with the highest insight that I've gleaned personally from the Holy Bible. I was once a staunch, devout, avid proponent and votive of the Christian faith by way of the Black Church in St. Paul, and I was blessed and grafted into an experience of Jesus Christ and that of the Holy Spirit, and that of some of the sensation and the joy and wonder and wisdom of the majority of people upon the United States that would be more generally known as the African American people. While growing up with the African American appearance, but being a first generation African and white American child born upon United States soil. when I would be at that church, it would be difficult to reach church because I was without means, and I was without direction. But I had much of faith and much initiative and intention for myself. So I never felt as less than anything or anyone. But I could appreciate that my lifestyle had been different, and I was away from some of the trappings and some of the success of what it means to be a young person doing fun stuff at times, since I had become serious about my faith at a very young age, but not before having partied a little bit and messing up a little bit, whether I had did damage to myself or not. But in that time, I would bum rides to church. I would walk to church in dangerous environments and dangerous times of day. I would attend all night shut-in, lock-in services, and I'd be praying that whole time. I was I had some, I was an attendant of the parking lot ministry, and I had enough of a presence that I at times got into conflict and contention with the brass of the church and eminent members of the church, while also being supported by some of the actual true saints of the church, the seasoning of the church, and some leadership of the church. Like anything is full of good and bad, church leadership is of good and bad. And that's not to say anyone is right or wrong, but that we're yet mere fallible humans. And myself, I would have had shortcomings there in how I was conducting and ordering my life. The main part of which, what I was doing for my living accommodation. That should have been the first thing I should have addressed as a young man, and that would have made my faith walk stronger, and it would have made myself less of a burden and less conflict for myself. But we are learning in this life, and at that time, I was marked and designated. One woman, Sister Tish, famous of renown in the Twin Cities, a very powerful youth outreach. She would target and support at-risk, marginal, vulnerable children of youth in the Twin Cities, and she was part of a dance troupe, and she believed in me. And she was the first woman that I saw when I gave my life to Jesus Christ at an altar call. When I had, it made me feel like crying because of how much I had been through and I already had on my chest by the time that I did that as a young man. Then, in the actual presence of divinity that I felt at the altar. Then when I walked out of the sanctuary to go to the grassy courtyard in front of the service while the service was still going on, Sister Tish is the first person I laid eyes on. So as me, a new baby in Christ, Sister Tish is the first beautiful person that smiled at me, recognized my state of mind, and that I may have bonded to as a spiritual mother, as a child seeing its mother for the first time. And some of her insight lessons have blessed me and taught me more than my own mother. But my mother is no pushover and giving me her all to this point. And my mother's a beautiful woman and warrior. And I want to say also, I didn't finish this part, but in the time of 21, my mother sustained a terminal diagnosis, and she completely transcended that diagnosis and has been free of remission since. And I wanted to commend her for that as a real warrior for living with that on her chest. But so that woman, Sister Tish, she commended me as having a prophetic spirit because I fell asleep listening to a hip hop album, and I told her about the dream I had, and she commended that. She appreciated me as a prophetic spirit. And then another one of the male leaders, one of the youth leaders there, who helped me with transportation, and a lot of people with transportation and accommodation at these youth venues for young Christians. He appreciated me as having a marked zeal. He said that he was inspired by my zeal in my worship, although then I wasn't a trained musician, although I had spent a lot of time with music and I believed in worship with passion. But this is what I wanted. So at that time, I was designated and I was marked and I was courted and I was cited and I was interviewed by mental health because of my zeal, but I didn't concede anything of aberrant behavior or superstition or even religious dogma or religious doctrine, because I had already been trained in a venue for saints and knew better than that. Although I had experienced mental turbulence before meeting the church, but once I did that, all that they could do was similar to in this video. A lot of people don't appreciate the way I speak to the current day, although I'm not speaking in error necessarily, and actually my cadence of speech and my propensity to bring different ideas together to support my statements and land my statements, and that was appreciated by them as racing thoughts, and so they assumed to perceive what my thoughts were constituted as just merely by the cadence of my speech and the tone and tenor of my speech. But my actual cultural background is very ambivalent. I am not of there's no people you can point to and say that this is my ethnic line culturally, because my mother is a white European American, but I was disowned by them as an adult, and I wasn't supported by her family as a child, or grew up enough around them and had the deep experiences to really call myself a white American by any means. So too, it'd be ambivalent for me to call myself a Black American or Black African or Native American, even though I'm born native to America and a lot of my friends were Native American. So I'm a multi, and then I grew up in 3 different regions: Minnesota, Twin Cities, Albuquerque, New Mexico, and Germantown / Memphis, Tennessee, East Memphis. And so those actual experiences and the people I would meet there are enough of a background. Like many Americans, I'm not unique as an American with that background, but I'm enough of ambivalent, and my personal experiences that I have referenced here are enough of complex and profound and ambivalent that it's actually difficult for people to understand me, and at times when I was young to understand myself. But at that time, when I was interviewed and surveyed for mental health, I asked my mother to procure a Bible for me, and I read it from cover to cover, but not out loud. So I'm not saying that I was cognizant of all that I read, although I did overlook it from end to end. And in my time in the church and doing that, the most salient point that I have drawn, that I've called and cusped from the Bible, I'm not sure if I'm using the word cusp right there, but the most salient point that I've gleaned and glistened from the Bible is that the Bible is a righteous book and is the word of God, and God is his word, and this universe is an experience of the Logos, which is combined thought and word form. Nothing is viable without the attendant words being stated or pronounced at one point, and also nothing is viable to be pronounced without the attendant actions to go with that. That is the Logos. Simply speaking, an example of the Logos, according to Arthur Avalon, is what we know of as electricity. I spoke to the author, to the eminent scholar, Tashreeq Bey personally. I consulted with him, and I solicited by way of contacting his organization to broach the potential to speak with him for one day, which I did, and he blessed me with that. And he said, yeah, I did lost that train of thought right there. But he said that I asked him, so there things about chemistry that we're not told as the masses go, as popular education goes, and popular media. He's like, man, what do you think? Of course there is. I was like, okay, well, I'm a CDL, and I always use the radio, and every single time I use the radio, it blows my mind. How does the radio work? How did the radio actually how does the radio work? Are there things about the radio that we don't know? He said, what the radio is based off of is the human body. So a lot of technology is actually secondhand. It's actually reverse engineered from the human body and the human voice. Radio technology, fundamentally, according to Grand Sheikh Tashreeq Bey himself, is reverse engineered from the human body, radio technology. Now, military activity, any form of military, is also based on the body, similar to medicine. I understand is that in the West, there is an overwhelming, preponderant fascination, fetish, entitlement, prestige, luxury, sex appeal, and also mitigating of enjoyment of suffering and life and death opportunities and power wielded based on tandem military, which includes paramilitary and law enforcement and security, and actually just any professional business that has people that have say-so and have any degree of power is somewhat attendant of a military, because according to Marquette, the YouTuber, power is synonymous with violence. So the potential for violence is power, but it also takes cooperation to manage that. So anything where power is being wielded, that is any storefront, any business, any place you would patronize at all, whether that's a curve like I'm at now, any place upon U.S. soil and or U.S. interests while aboard a ship or an airplane or somewhere else upon somebody else's jurisdiction and auspices, nowhere upon the earth that I know of is free earth, and anything thereby is reined in by physical military might, whether that be professional military, paramilitary, secret military, simple military, and ancillary military, like that is informants, like security officers. If you watch content about the streets, one of the most dangerous persons in the street is not the gangster, is not the dope man, is not the enforcer, is not the mafia person in itself. It's the spotter. It's the person that has eyes on the ground. Yeah, man, did you know that person said that? Do you know that person is there right now? Do you know that person did that? That's the most actual dangerous, formidable person in the street. Similarly, you could say a security guard is the most dangerous person for a civilian, because a security guard can call them people on you. And if you mess up in front of a security guard, you can get all the way up to being police brutality, police genocide, and/or incarcerated. And then at that point you're incarcerated, you're now a POW. You can have your physical body violated daily by other inmates or the actual prison system in terms of cavity checks, which can actually change your health and your viability as an adult. So that's how formidable a security guard is. But I'm saying that power is tandem. The fear of life and death is power. So power is not only violence, but it's the threat of violence, which on a primal instinctual level is the penalty and threat of life and death. But also, the military holds the power of life and death by way of taking life or protecting it by being able to take it. Medicine holds the power of life and death by able to preserve life and further life and prevent life from being taken. But both are as equally hella serious, as hella sexy, as hella money making, and as hella important to our modern iteration society. But both military and medicine understand the body in terms of systems. So the body, similar, also another thing, if I'm saying, according to Tasha McBay, radio is based off of the reverse engineer from the human body. Likely so too is the computer reverse engineer from the human body and mind in terms of compartmentalization, memory, and function and systems is the computer too. So military and medicine understand the human body and being able to deal with the other humans, whether to preserve life or met out death, is in terms of systems, but in terms of electricity. A human body, if a military was going to go to a city and they're going to lay siege to a city, the way that they would approach, confront, and engage that city or that position or that unit or that personnel is to understand them in terms of an electrical grid component. How do you neutralize something? So police and law enforcement and military are concerned with neutralizing something. So similar, a trolley just went by. If you hop on that trolley, hey man, let me see what's in your motherfucking pocket right now, motherfucking person, please, thank you. Because I have this thing right here and it's gonna scan your shit. And if your shit doesn't check out, it's not gonna beep right, and you're gonna look like an asshole in front of everyone, and you're not gonna feel like this sexy motherfucker. You're actually gonna have your balls broken for you. So you're gonna be neutralized. That's military activity. Here goes this person. They didn't get around to breaking the law other than to sneak on a train, but you're gonna neutralize their social and professional viability by humiliating them in front of everyone. That's actually still electrical. They scan your ticket electrically, beep, and then they punk you out. It might as well be electrical to what it does to your mojo and your libido and your life force and your self-esteem. And then your further interactions, which are a function of that traumatization and that embarrassment that you'll likely fuck up more and have more of difficulty because they did that for you. So I'm just saying that military and medicine and technology, which technology features into both military and medicine, is based on electricity second, the human body first. But electricity, according to Arthur Avalon, is a function of the logos. That is the world power of the logos. It's sophisticated. He didn't go exactly into it, but this life, see, if you go in a car, right? So a lot of people are familiar with the term nocturnal. An owl is a nocturnal creature. So too is a possum. These are nocturnal creatures. Another word is diurnal. So a crow would seem to be a dark creature because it's dark like that, but they're actually diurnal creatures, and crows are preoccupied with the sun. Anytime you see a crow, you likely see them first thing in the morning and late at night because they're corresponding with the sun. Crows are deeply attuned with the sun. That's part of their niche and lane in life. And thereby, different degrees of meteorology and foretelling and forecasting known to farmers of old and probably scientists presently can be appreciated by the activities of birds. Certain meteorological effects can be appreciated by the activities of birds. So too can some of local solar, all of weather is attendant of local solar activity, such as the actual revolution of the sun around the earth. That's solar activity. The soul itself is solar. The sun is solar. The solar system means the sun system, soul, sun, solar. But all of our weather patterns are related to solar activity, not limited to the sun, also the moon and local planets, and the earth too, and the rhythms and the polarity of the earth, which they affect, which also affects the hot and coldness of the earth, which I think are more of charges than a reality in itself. I think heat and cold are more of charges, and the sensation of cold and heat are effects. So different birds can betray what's happening in the atmosphere, because I think that birds actually are the atmosphere. They don't fly in the atmosphere. They're actually physical members of the atmosphere, so too flying creatures. And I think that what birds do more, I don't think birds actually fly. Birds fall. They're actually fall. It's a sophisticated way of falling. So too flies. I don't think that it's like, so it seems random, right? When you see a fly, right? A fly goes in front of you, zoop, that seems random. However, if a fly lands on you, the fly is actually less random than you, because as random as the fly seems, that fly can touch you, but you can't touch the fly. So the fly is actually more present of mind and cognizant than you demonstrably. But when it's flying in the air, that seems random. I think that flies do at least two things. I think that they go to weakness. So if you've had a healed, if you notice your leg, like I have a wound on my leg. That wound I sustained by catching a guardrail on a motorcycle at 40 miles an hour. I got it stitched up one night en route to my destination. I hopped right the hell back on the motorcycle. It healed up over a month. Then I was in Minnesota in the summertime. I went swimming in the in Lake Calhoun, formerly Lake Calhoun, presently Lake Bidet Maka Sky. And it got infected because I didn't know there was a high E. coli advisory at that time. It opened up doing that. Then I was exercising around Christmas of last year. I was doing postures, and I rested my left leg on my right shin, and it re-lacerated. So this wound here has been lacerated 3 times, and thank heaven it's now neatly and currently perfectly healed. However, scar tissue is never completely healed. But if a fly were to land on me, right? If a fly come up and land on me, that too, the interest of a dog, of a dog too. They'll actually be more interested in my right leg than my left leg, because they're actually interested in the weakness of my body. So I think that flies are interested in weakness, because where we see weakness, this sees a strength. So there's an advantage to a fly in the weakness of something. So they're actually helpers. They're part of the, but I think that when you see a bird, right? Birds are actually mitigating the atmosphere. I think also so too are humans in the atmosphere. When people play or hate your shit, that's actually the atmosphere interfering with you, because anything that you do, that you move, like if you try to go up in a spaceship, the atmosphere will calibrate you. That is, you can't break the sound barrier easily. You can't break the atmosphere, the Earth's gravitation easily without checked by the atmosphere. As you go, the faster atmosphere checks you. The more you ask, the more the atmosphere also prompts you. The more you fuck up, the more the atmosphere corrects you. So there's actually no getting away from the disciplining of the atmosphere. Shit. When you're what I'm saying is that when you're minding your business, and say there's a book called The War of Art. That book called The War of Art refers to the fact that in this life, as soon as you start doing something that has the potential to change other people's lives, what's more actually significant is that you will change your own life, because when you are life, you are existence too. And if you fundamentally change yourself, that is, if you're self-possessed, if you command yourself and you sustain your own initiative and your own goings on, you actually, that's the best standpoint to change other people. So if you're getting around to changing yourself more so than other people,